Next up, we have another panel discussion with quite a catchy title, Innovation versus Regulation. I'd like to welcome Eduard Grigoryan from Interstech to the stage and to also invite his panelists and to introduce them a little bit. He will be joined by Hagen Thomas Weiss from Dentons, Michael Spitz from 360X, Alizera Siadat from Enerton, Hedi Navasan from Crystal Blockchain, and Dirk Findeisen from MSG Rethink Compliance. The stage is yours. Have fun.
Welcome, everyone. I'm very pleased to host this panel on innovation and versus regulation to the topic of like our blog is NFTs versus DeFi. And in a minute, you will get a chance to introduce yourselves, but until then, quick short note for you. So since the topics of DeFi and NFTs differ significantly under aspects of innovation and regulation, we will start with the first half focusing on DeFi, and then we'll go to NFTs afterwards. Now let's kick off with the round of introductions, starting with, yep.
Yes, pleasure. Hagen Weiss, Dentons, former BaFin, former Federal Ministry of Finance, former jurisdiction of the Chancellery, and I wrote the infamous Electronic Securities Act and parts of MiCA and the DLT pilot regime.
Thank you.
So, hi everyone, and it's Alizera. I'm a crypto lawyer, I would say, and I'm quite active. I'm a partner at Enerton and doing some other stuff. So just check out my LinkedIn or our webpage, Enerton, and then you will see more about me.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Hedi Navasan, Head of Compliance and Regulatory Affairs at Crystal Blockchain Analytics, working also frequently with Alizera, and one of the reasons we are here today as well. By background, of course, Marina already had a presentation about Crystal Blockchain, but yeah, I've been involved with CFI and traditional finance, working, historically for HSBC and other financial institutions. And there was a time to move on to the crypto space. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Dirk Findeisen, MSG Rethink Compliance. We are focusing on anti-financial crime compliance, whether it's centralized finance or decentralized finance, or so-called designated non-financial business and professions, as the FATF is calling them. So it's all about preventing anti-financial crime, or let's say being on the analytics side to follow the money.
Follow the money. My name is Michael Spitz. Hi, I'm the co-founder and co-CEO of 360X, responsible for tech and regulatory. Before that, I used to run the venture capital and R&D arm of Commerzbank Group. And also basically been quite active before that in securitization and trading, and very happy also to be together with Philip, who's the co-host here, to run the DLT Talents program, where we basically educate women in blockchain for 16 weeks. And yeah, let's see where this discussion takes us today. I always like to be with Alizera on the panel, because we try to be as controversial as we can, so in order to entertain at the evening a little bit. So let's see what we do this year.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
This one free.
Now let's kick off with DeFi, and this question will be for everyone. So the DeFi space has been growing very fast in recent years, and actually the regulators are trying to come up with new ways and also to keep up with the new developments in the space. So the question is actually, do you see some kind of potential danger, or let's call it possibility, that a shadow or parallel decentralized financial system based on DLT and crypto will basically establish itself and to a certain extent also reach mass adoption?
maybe I just kick off ladies first. But so it's, I think, coming also from a regulatory background and the innovation in this space, I think the core, what we should be very careful is that we are not regulating the innovation, and we should not get to the direction to regulate the technology. We should innovate the regulation. We should bring technology, like that should be the approach. Merely annexing and extending the existing regulation that is in place for financial institutions and traditional finance to the DeFi even space or crypto space, it's not a match. And on the other hand, on the DeFi, and I leave the rest to comment on, specifically with the DeFi, it's what we are talking about, or the algorithm stable coins. It's about, there is no authority behind it. We are not talking about a legal entity or a central control behind protocols or projects. Therefore, there is really not a space for regulation because there is no intermediary, there is no authority or centralized, a controlling team behind of protocols that we are talking about. However, when it comes to the consumer protection, user protection, that's where maybe there would be a regulation in place. When we are talking about risky investment projects, like as a user, or the public, you are not sure what type of DeFi projects are riskier when it comes to, investing in those projects. What if the project collapses? What will happen to you? That part of protection for the consumer market, that is something to look at. But the DeFi, in the essence, I think the nature of DeFi does not really match, with the regulation, and that's why we are seeing regulators are still assessing. We are not seeing DeFi get regulated in MiCA, transfer fund regulation, etc., etc. They are still assessing. The same with FATF as well. They mentioned they are monitoring the developments. They are not yet regulating, and I do hope they don't rush to regulate as well. But of course, we have cases of Luna Terra, and these are not the best examples, of course. But one example is out there, and it changes the image of the space.
Thank you. Any other perspectives to that? And we will come to the point of technology enabling new ways of supervision, I would say.
Maybe one pattern that you can see on a global scale is that regulators are quite observing what will happen or what is happening on the markets. So typically you say regulators are always behind, but another way of looking at it is they're observing the market. And if you look on centralized finance, what you can see is a consolidation of the market. So it's less competition out there. What the regulator wants to have is more competition. So why not just see what the market is developing, how the market is developing, and then step in a certain period of time or in a certain time frame, and then say to all players, now you all have to play by the same rules. And then regulation steps in. So I think that's more a roadmap, and it's the same roadmap decentralized finance has to go through as centralized finance is still in, with the same challenges and with some different challenges. And that's why we think we also need to rethink compliance, or rethink regulation, also by adopting to the abilities, the challenges, and the problems that occur by the new technology.
So what I like what you just said is like the risk-based approach. So same risk, same regulation. And this is, I think, something where we all need to pay more attention to, and we all need to educate the community, and not just the regulator, but the community. I just give an example, the Tornado Cash incident. So the Tornado Cash incident is, for me, it's something which happened because, to my opinion, the regulator did not really understand what the product is, what Tornado Cash is. They did not really understand how to tackle this new technology and how to regulate it. For those of you who are not familiar with the Tornado Cash incident or what is happening right now, so we have the US regulator OFAC, which has put Tornado Cash as a web page, as a software, as a smart contract on a sanctioned list, which is first of a time what happened, because so far we never had it that a non-person, like it's not a legal person, it's a natural person, it's a web page as a smart contract putting on a sanction list and being sanctioned on one side. And the other thing what happened is that the developer of Tornado Cash, Alexei Petsev, is now in custody in Amsterdam for a crime which was not even officially announced by the authorities. So he's for almost 100 days already in custody, and they did not really raise a case against him because they do not really understand what his participation in the Tornado Cash incident is. And for those of you who don't really understand what happened, North Korean group Lazarus used Tornado Cash to launder money. And now they're trying to go to the instrument they use, Tornado Cash, and go to the stakeholders of Tornado Cash and to regulate it, or to not just regulate it, to actually apply law, and to apply law, in my understanding, in a wrong way. But I'm also happy to hear what a former regulator and now an advisor has to say about this.
Well, I'll happily answer that question. So maybe coming back to your actual question first, you got to ask yourself, what are we talking about here in the first place? The definition, the very definition of DeFi, what is that? It's maybe even some kind of anthropological question, because you see a lot of projects out there, they call themselves DeFi, they label themselves DeFi, but they're at best they're semi-DeFi. So I guess we have to answer that question first, and coming back to the question that you just had. Well, I think we have to distinguish between supervision per se and regulation. Regulation, that's what you said there, it's always a bit slow to catch up. However, there's always the, let's call it, danger of supervisory action against entities, individual people, what you just mentioned, poor guy in Amsterdam, and maybe even software, even code now, Tornado Cash. So I guess as long as you distinguish those 3 different chapters, you can start regulating DeFi. Problem is, nevertheless, real DeFi doesn't have a regulatory target on its back. You can't quite catch it, and that's why you have some kind of almost executive overreach, as in Tornado Cash.
I'm thankful that you already mentioned the topic of supervision. We will come to that in a short note, but until then, again, to both of your directions, the regulatory developments currently in DeFi. Do you see anything happening in Europe, in Germany? Do you see some other jurisdictions maybe in the world which are a step ahead? And yeah, and also we want to talk about this as innovation versus regulation. Is there any way where lawmakers can actually appropriately address this dilemma of innovation and regulation?
DeFi is definitely a topic for BaFin. We know that. There's information currently being collected, and there's going to be something of that, we can be sure. Is there any way that we could make it easier? Yes, interaction. The market and the regulator / supervisor, they definitely need to interact with each other. They need to educate each other, because sometimes, and I can tell you that as you know, from my time as a supervisor, policy guy at the ministry, and then even other aspects, it's sometimes like there's so much stuff that gets lost in translation when like there's startups, maybe in incumbents like banks and other intermediaries talking to the regulator, and they're definitely talking about the same topic, but in different languages. And that's why it's so important to interact with each other before you actually pounce as a regulator or even as a startup.
Yeah, adding on that, so we don't only have the BaFin in Germany, we also have the German Bundesbank. And for those of you who are interested in the regulation of DeFi, the German Bundesbank has published last year in July a very nice paper, which is called DeFi actually. It's in German and in English. It's not just on regulation, it's also on economics and also on technical issues regarding DeFi. So it's very worth reading that. And regarding your question, so far we don't have any regulation on DeFi yet, because if it's really true DeFi and there's no intermediary and no one who has control or influence on the infrastructure, you cannot really regulate it from no perspective. However, looking at what is coming soon, the markets and crypto assets regulation, Hagen, we discussed that. So there's a new crypto asset service provider category. So for those of you who have not seen it yet, so the new English version of the MiCA is out. Look for the so-called facilitator of a transaction. This is a new category. And a facilitator of a transaction is less than a crypto custodian. It's less than a broker. It is really a new category. We do not know it from MiFID. And I believe it should be something which like a catch-all regulation, which may get those not true DeFi, so something which is calling itself DeFi, but where maybe there is a entity in the background which is providing the protocols or which is providing the infrastructure of bringing the parties together and facilitating the transaction.
So basically what you say is that the regulator's approach could be eventually the institutionalization of the gatekeepers in form of the crypto asset service providers, what in turn would lead to some kind of centralization again, right?
Definitely true, and that's obviously a problem. It's almost like a cop-out, because if you rely too heavily on gatekeeper regulation, then that doesn't really help you with actually decentralized projects. So you can either, like I said, rely on gatekeeper issues, or you try to deploy the regulatory equivalent to carpet bombing, which is a catch-all phrase in any kind of legal statute, so that you could anything and anybody who have even a resemblance, faint resemblance of control when it comes to projects. So somewhere in between, there should be a way out.
Maybe also, what a trend we are seeing that is maybe helping both the community and from the regulatory perspective is that I think the key element is also knowledge sharing and training. It's not that we train the regulator, but it's look, it's the reality. The language is different. It's the reality that there is this gap when both parties, a crypto native background wants to talk to the regulator. You may not understand one another. And that's happening a lot of times in various industries, with the banking board as well. You have lobby sessions. You sit in with the politicians before they are going to announce a new bill, a new law, and you start talking, having the same common understanding. And that is what we are at the moment trying to do in various jurisdictions, on a really literally pro bono basis, just to have knowledge sharing sessions with central banks globally, just to explain what we are seeing in the market, what this technology embraces, what is the real true nature of DeFi. And I have to be very honest, DeFi, we are even further. We have to even talk a bit more down the path about how really blockchain is working. So it's which is fine. It's the speed is so much. Every day I was talking to Alreza. Every day you wake up, there is something else out there. There is a new incident. There is a new breaches, and you really have to catch up. So it's quite a work also for the regulators. And I think there are some very good works at the moment. I know that there are some knowledge sharing sessions also with BaFin, but with FCA UK, they also organized crypto sprints, inviting the community, having the same sessions, trainings. That is something that would lead to a better path of regulation.
I think we just do, or we just pretend a little bit that what we need to have is a sort of compliance certainty for the DeFi region. And we don't have compliance certainty in the fiat version. So we don't have it in central finance as well. So why should we have it here? So as long as we only talk about the same language and so on, that's important for sure. But that's, central finance is in discussion with central banks, with regulators all over since 20 years, roughly, and it's not helping. Just to provoke, you need to offer something more, something, let's say, more advanced, like you mentioned, same risk, same rule. That's a sort of an embedded regulatory framework that is, let's say, technology averse. So it needs to be valid for all the different technology, or for the different chains that you do. That can be handled by the industry itself. So if you can come up with a sort of a standard, that would be helpful. And even then, you have the issue, if it's a standard, who is govern the standard, and that would be a central body somehow. And that is another problem for the decentralized finance area, I guess.
Maybe just a couple of comments and not trying to do a history lesson here, but when we started the first DLT transaction with some of you guys in the room in 2017, one of the questions was, let us get rid of physical paper, or the requirement of Globalurkunde, and which then 4 years later went into what Hagen said, into EWPG. But of course, you cannot push it all the way through, including equity and so on, because there's so many other stuff that will ultimately be there. And on the one hand, I see the push of all of the crypto native DeFi people and so on. Why can't we do this? It's easy. This is what technology does. And I was, I think 2 years ago or 3 years ago in the conference saying, regulators have to accept that we no longer, when applying DLT or blockchain technology, you can regulate the entities. You have to have someone accountable. You need to regulate actually the transaction, which is exactly what it did in the case of Tornado Swap. So I was the one who asked for, have a look at the smart contract, at the transaction, not the entities that run a node and so on. So I think it's a trial and error situation at the moment. We really can, they overshoot it in the one case. Obviously, once you go into a smart contract, in my opinion, the regulator should actually be the ones who approve the smart contract, similar as they're currently approving the prospectus. This is just, they need to hire technical people instead of lawyers. But it took them 20 years to approve prospectus. So another 18 years from now, they will approve smart contracts. That's just where I see this evolution going.
Thank you very much. Given the time constraint we have, unfortunately, we cannot talk about supervision anymore. We will switch now to NFTs. I bet, Michael, you want to talk a little bit about this topic even more. So, yeah, after a period of really crazy highs, the NFT market has plummeted in recent months, and we don't hear about it not as much anymore. So, do you think that this is a typical cooling phase where the market professionalizes, or is it more like a part of a larger market movement?
I believe, I'm going to start. So I think NFTs in a narrow sense really need to find its real case and use case, which is on the one hand clearly collectibles, and we address some of that, and then we're very often in the, let's say, not security regulator. So there will be use cases that will grant you access to other stuff. So we've done a couple of drops for Haftbefehl, Frankfurt Rapper, and so on. But this is not for investors. This is purely for collecting and getting able to concert and so on and so forth. I think we'll see a lot of stuff related to the identity NFTs. So I think this is where there's really, but at the end of the day, we still haven't reached any kind of floor or whatever in terms of where we stand with the infrastructure. If I'm trying to sell an NFT or security to anyone, I need to spend 90% of my effort on, do you actually have a wallet? Do you have a seed phrase? Do you want to onboard something? We're not at this stage yet. I mean, it's more likely, at least in Germany, that someone has an account with a Volksbank, with a Sparkasse and so on. But a wallet is something that's still not in this room, but normally it's quite rare. So I think this is what's really limiting at least the NFT situation as such.
Thanks for that. Regarding the regulatory developments again, looking at you both again, we know MiCA won't cover NFTs, but at least they announced they will make a proposal in the next 1.5 years, as far as I know. What can we expect here?
Well, I guess the mere fact that MiCA is not supposed to be covering the classic NFTs, that in itself is a piece of news, definitely. However, it's not that clear-cut even. If you look at certain kinds of NFTs, especially the fractionalized ones, that that leads you to the question that you have to answer. Is that a fungible token maybe? Obviously you can use with, you can work with different token standards. Ethereum especially has a lot of options as far as that is concerned. And then you can kind of like bypass that regulatory question. However, as far as I know, there's people already busy coming up with a special legislative proposal when it comes to NFTs. Meantime, and Alieza told me that earlier, he loves NFTs, so I guess the lawyers out there will have to work out specific solutions when it comes to those like fringe cases.
I mean, yeah, I'm with Michael and with Hagen, and what you said before towards DeFi also is valid for NFTs. You really have to look, is it a true non-fungible token? And this test is not that easy. I mean, this is also why it took so long for Mika to say, is it in scope, or is it out scope? Because if you have a technical, unique standard like an ERC 721, you can still have, in the end of the day, something which is from a financial instrument perspective fungible, because you could have 1,000 same images connected to the ERC 721, and then I would say it is still tradable, and then it would be in scope of Mika, even though you have a ERC 721. But you have like the Bored Ape Yacht Club monkey, 1,000 different monkeys, because they slightly look different, then you're out of scope if you are also like unique from a technical perspective. And this test is not that easy. I mean, I explained to you in these two examples, but there are different use cases coming, like you said, Michael. We will have maybe NFTs on tokenized carbon certificates. We will have NFTs on something else, and maybe even on ID, and then you have to do this test and see. But even if you have it not in scope of Mika, it does not mean it's not regulated, because in Germany we have some instrument which is not fungible, like Vermögensanlage, and we have also the classical Rechnungseinheiten and other crypto assets which not supposed to be fungible, so it could be still regulated, and this is something you need to check out. And therefore, it's not that easy to say, yo, NFTs are not regulated anymore.
A closely related question to you, Michael. Which implications could regulation have on your business model at 360X? And are there any scenarios you're planning for?
Okay, all good. I have to say that, given the fact that we just received the license for BaFin, so everything great. Thank you very much. No, joking. But I think overall we have to take into consideration where do we stand, whether it is now a regulated instrument or whether it's how we're doing. Because regulation is a catch-all phrase and it means nothing. Because regulation to me also means AML, Geldwäsche. We also have to comply with that kind of stuff. Regulation means, can I actually sell a certain thing to someone else on the primary side, on the secondary side? And I think what we really have to take into consideration now is as we have a European Union and we have all these different countries, you know, how is that harmonized? Right? Whether it's MiCA, DLT pilot regime, Schwarmfinanzierungsverordnung, crowdfunding, blah, blah, blah. You know, you have different things that could tackle the same thing. And, you know, me being a structured product guy at the end, I kind of look at it and think, hey, I could actually apply one over the other. So if I have, for instance, an asset that is below 1 million, can I pick and choose that I actually all of a sudden have to take the MiFID definition of the investor? Or maybe I take the crowdfunding one. But if I take the crowdfunding one, I may be liable personally. No, not me. Actually, the board of the issuer is all of a sudden liable. Then I go outside of Germany because there it's not the board anymore. So maybe I apply in the Netherlands for crowdfunding, selling in Germany. And I think this is what we're now all learning, that, you know, and this is the good thing about the regulator, they're very experienced with regulatory arbitrage and they will see that through. So this is not going to happen, and being transparent and open is what we really, you know, there's a tall order with from ESMA to DLT pilot regime to German regulation and so on. I think this will all clear out if we have good players with good intention, and I think most of them are, you know, have good intentions. So all good.
Glad to hear that. Regarding some illicit activities in the space of NFTs, again, looking at data and Dirk, have you seen, like with the rise of NFTs, that some illicit activity moved to this area? And finally, do you have you seen some after the NFT market crash that all this illicit activities is again kind of gone? And are there any ways how you can use new types of technologies in order to, yeah, tackle that?
I guess let's come to the old fraud triangle, where one dimension is opportunity. I guess DeFi offers a lot of opportunity for organized crime to get their illicit money in. It's not that easy to get it out, to be honest. It's not that easy as some of the critics meant to be. But if I'm looking within the DeFi scene into non-functional tokens, I would say that's the biggest opportunity, especially if it's about the art market and if it's about the art market participants. By the way, if I'm always hearing that the regulation, if we want to go for that regulation, is far beyond what is done for the central regulation, that's not true. Only because the law enforcement is not after the regulation doesn't mean that there is no regulation out there. So at least with the Money Laundering Directive 4, there was already, let's say, an obligation for a KYC process also for art dealers and so on. So why should that not apply to the KYC principles that needs to be taken into account for DeFi as well? So I think that there's still some illicit money flows happening in this market. Is it substantial towards to the centralized finance? I would say it's not that substantial. That's why I also think that the regulator is, let's say, very on the point for some specific topics, not in the broad range as it is for the centralized finance scheme. But let's say if the market turns to increase, again, the regulators will have a look on that. I'm pretty sure about that.
Maybe I just saw the eye on the clock. At the moment we are following very closely the trends with blockchain data analytics with NFTs. One of the main risks we are seeing and the market is seeing is the wash trading. So that is maybe the biggest highlight of if we are allocating any risk to the NFTs. That if you keep on selling and reselling back to yourself or to your own gang, it's very difficult. The price goes. However, I would like to mention that it's like an auction as well. So and again with the nature of there is one very good element here because we are talking about blockchain and it brings transparency. So it's quite different, but again the nature of also art, what we see in the auction as well, and also financial institution when it comes to risk-based approach. If you are having a transaction related to a jewelry or a piece of art, you cannot put a price for it. So it can be that's why it's as Alireza was also mentioning, it's you have to have a risk-based approach when you are dealing with different and for me NFT is definitely different than a DeFi type of a subject. But we have to see what's coming next. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have to wrap up now, but we're perfectly in time, I guess. So thank you very much for your excellent insights and thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.